thing I want to talk about is template images. So we've looked at templates a little bit in terms of setting the tint color, but what exactly is a template image? Well, let's take a look and let's add in another image here and we'll configure it as a template. So first of all, I'm going to go to my assets library here from my actual WatchKit app. I'm not going to stream it in from the phone. I'm going to put it on the actual Watch app. So in my assets.xc assets folder, you can see I still have my arrows and circle and my stars. And I'm going to add in here a heart image that's going to be my template. So you can see I'm following the naming convention, right? So heart at 2x.png. I'm going to click it and drag it in over here. Okay. And this is a little different from my other images because this has basically a blank background. So wherever it's not a background, it's going to be not colored when we define it as a template. So let's kind of take a look at that here. So right now I'm just going to change it from here render as default to render as template image. Okay, so now it's a template image. And what I'm going to do is go to my storyboard and I'm just going to add that in here using our objects library. So I'm going to grab it in, put it in as an image, and I'll just give it a name here. Now let's see what happens if we just run it as is. So you might expect that it would just show as red as what it is, but it's not exactly going to do that. So it's because we said it's a template, it's going to give it kind of a default tint color. And let's wait for that to load up and we'll see that it is kind of a blue color. So there we see, yeah, so it's a template. So you can still see around the edges, right? So the background is transparent. But because we just defined it as a template, it's going to default to this template color. So templates are good if, for example, you want to do like a stylized image of your logo, or maybe as something you can change the color on, for example. Right? In an actual image, it's not so easy to actually change the color of the image. You might have to switch between different versions of the image. But a template, you can just kind of update the tint. Right? So over here, if we give it a different tint color, that would change what color it looks like. So let's see. Let's select here from our color wheel. We did yellow or green. That would obviously change the tint color when it actually loads up. Okay, and just as a sanity check, let's make sure that it does what we expect. Yeah, so there you can see it's kind of useful to be able to manipulate these template images. So let's adjust some of our code here and get rid of some of the stuff we have on screen. So first of all, let's bring out the side panel and let's see. Let's get rid of, you know what, I think it's fine as is actually. And let's actually go to our back-end code. And here is where I will get rid of the background image that is currently set as the circle. So I'm just going to get rid of that code. Okay, and now what we can do is, you know, we can actually set the tint programmatically. So let's say when the start button is pushed, we'll change the tint, for example. So we'll do that here. And before that, we need an outlet here for our actual image. So control click, bring it over as an outlet. I'll put it below the group definition. My heart. And you can see it's still a WatchKit interface image. It's just a different type of image. So it's a template now. Okay, so when the button was tapped, we'll say my heart dot set tint color. You can see it takes a UI color. So we can say UI color dot, let's see, purple. Okay, and this way we can change the tint color programmatically. Could be good for all kinds of reasons. Maybe the user prefers a different style. You can offer styling options or some kind of neat thing where you kind of cycle through colors, for example. Let's try it out here. Okay, so now it's green, we hit the start button, and it changed to purple. Pretty neat. Another thing we can do, because it is just an image like any other image, we can just set it as, for example, a background in a group. if we wanted something to kind of sit on top of it. So before it pushed our start button down to the bottom, but what if we wanted our start button kind of in the middle here like we had before? Well, it's basically the same thing as we had before. So my group dot set background image named, and we give it an image name as a string, like so. Heart. Okay, and so let me erase this, get rid of our outlet as well, and that means I'm going to get rid of this line of code for now. Okay, and this will allow us to set the background like we were doing before. It might look a little wonky because it's going to make it fit the dimensions of our actual group, but essentially we're doing the same as we did before, right? So we're setting a background image. In this case, the image just happens to be a template. All right, so there we go. Yep, so it's a little stretched out, but still working. And yeah, and that's how you would do it as a background image, which you're probably going to want to do a lot of the times if you're using templates for that, right? Something to kind of take up some screen real estate, and then you can layer things on top of it. I mean, heck, you could even layer another image on top of that, for example. Now, if you wanted to change the tint color, there's a couple ways we could do that. One of the ways we could do is if we just change the quote-unquote global tint color. So if we wanted to do that, well, let's just go to our kind of main editor here. So basically, I'm going to grab basically any point on this interface, bring out our attribute, our interface controllers over here, and if I go to this option here, so basically the file inspector instead of the attributes inspector, it looks like a file. I can actually just set the global tint here. Right? It kind of defaults to that blue color, but we can change it to whatever we want here. And then everything that we don't set a specific tint on will be tinted this color in terms of templates anyway. So now if we launch this, we will see that it's going to be a different color instead of blue. And that's one way we can change the tint. The other way is we can just manually add it in as an object and then set it either in the builder or programmatically as well. And we can see here that it is now tinted the color we specified. So it's probably not the ideal solution if you have multiple templates, template images, and you want to set different tints for each of them. But if you have just the one, hey, I don't see why this wouldn't work. You can just set the global tint. For now, I'm going to set it to default though, just so that in case we do add more, otherwise you would just set the image manually. So instead of doing it like so, let's bring in our attributes inspector, and we will add an image here like so, put it inside the group, and yeah, let's put it on top of the start button. Image heart. Okay, make sure it's inside the group. Yeah. All right, and then here we can kind of adjust other features as well. So let's connect it to an outlet. My heart. So we can do like we did before. We can set the tint. We could also, for example, change the size. And this is true of any image really. So let's say my heart dot, and you can see here there's a couple options. So for example, set alpha, set width, set height. And it just takes a CG float. So for example, let's say, I don't know, 50.0 my heart dot set height 50.0. Let's just see what that looks like. And you can see that any images can be manipulated in a similar way. You know, even if you're loading them up from your phone and you're streaming them to the watch device, you can kind of reformat them as needed whenever you see fit. So let's see what happens. Hit start. Okay, so it shrunk down, and that's how we can kind of play with our images. Let's say just for fun, we wanted our start button to actually cycle through different random tint colors for our heart image, our heart template, I should say. So how can we do that? Well, let's get some practice in. So basically, I'm just going to create a constant here, and I'm going to call it tint colors. And it's going to be a type of array, and in the array, we're going to have UI colors. So that's going to look something like this. So we'll say UI color dot green. Okay, then we'll say UI color dot blue. Please go down. There you go. UI color dot. Let's see. Let's say red. UI color dot cyan. And let's do one more. UI color dot purple. Okay. And we should probably put in commas here. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to basically select a random tint color somehow. And there is a method available to us kind of built in here that we can call. So let's test something out first. So let's say myHeart.set tint color. And the way we can kind of select these based on index, if you're not too familiar with accessing array values, they're zero-based indexed. So that means, for example, we could say something like this: tint colors, and we want the value at position 0. So when we do this, this will return us green because position 0 is the first in the array because it's zero-based index. It starts at 0. This would be at position 1. So when we run this code, this will give us a green color. And I'm just going to let that load up in the background here. So what we want to figure out is how we can kind of get a random number within our range of 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we want to figure out how to do that. And here, if I hit start, you see that it changes to green because it selected the first index there. So how can we do that? Well, it's actually not too difficult. So first I'm going to get rid of this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically do one of these guys. So return an integer. And there's a method available called arc4random. So you can see there's a couple options here. Now arc4random is not what we want. And what this would return would be an integer between 0 and 2 to the power of 32 minus 1, which could be a huge number. That's not what we want. And it's possible to pass in a value if we say arc4random_uniform. And then you see that it takes an upper bound. So what that means is with this pseudo random number generator, it's not truly random because that's very difficult to do. We can basically say, okay, give me a number between 0 and whatever upper limit I give to you. And we can use that to kind of cycle through our array up there. So let's do that. arc4random_uniform. Upper bound, we can just pass in a number. So if we want a number between 0 and 5, for example, this should return us something in that vein, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So when we give it 5, it won't return 5. It'll return 5 below 5 basically. So this will return us a number between 0 and 5, not including 5. So we want 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. We don't want 5. If we try to pass in too high a value here, it'll basically return us with an error. But we want to be able to kind of grab a random index between 0 and 4. Okay, so now we have our index. Now how do we access our actual value? Well, we've already kind of seen how to do that. So let's just define that as well. Let random value equals. And we are basically going to say tint colors at whatever random index value we figured out here. Right, so unlike going tint colors at position 0, we'll just pass in a number between 0 and 4, and that'll allow us to update it on the fly. And now we can just do myHeart.set tint color random value, right, because these are UI color.green, so it already basically has the code we need. Now let's try this out. Let's see if it works. Okay, we'll load this up here. Okay, no errors right off the bat. That's always a good sign. And should be any minute now. There it goes. Okay, here we go. All right. Seems to work exactly as advertised. Cool. Now there is a more efficient way, or I don't know if it's more efficient, but there's a different way of putting in an upper bound here. So let's say we had like a huge list of colors and you didn't want to go through and count them each individually. We can do that in a different way here if we go something like this. So uint 32, 32-bit unsigned integer value type. And then we basically say tint colors dot count. Okay, so now this will just return whatever the value, however many elements we have in our tint colors object, or array in our case. And basically the same as us telling it to use 5, because let's check it out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this will return 5, and it's basically doing the same thing. And by the way, if you forget to say, hey, transform this into uint32, it will pop up with one of these fix-it recommendation things. So this little stop sign. Cannot convert value of type to expected argument type uint32, and we can just make sure that it does it for us. Okay, so this is really just a different way of doing it. And I think I'm missing one of these. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, so it's just a different way, but it kind of makes more sense when you consider your arrays might have lots of entries. Just for a sanity check, as usual, we'll load this up, but this is just kind of a fun way to learn about data types and how you can kind of manipulate them in our watchOS. Okay, so we'll let that load up here. There we go. Let's try it out. Great, still working. And I just saw purple, which is good, so it's counting all of them. And that's one way we can do kind of a randomize function. Of course, there's other ways we could have approached this. This is just one way. Let's say instead of just a straight array, you wanted to do a dictionary, for example. So associate keys with values. Well, that would look something like this. So in our case, it doesn't really make a ton of sense to have a key value pair. We don't really need to, but I could see where it come in handy. So for example, if you have like name, value, for example. But let's see how we can kind of iterate through this. Not too different, really. We just have to make sure that we tell it to use the values. So if we say tint colors dot values at whatever index, and we might have to convert this into an array as well. Let's see, cannot subscript a value of type lazy map collection. Yeah, so if we convert it into an array, let's see if that works. Okay, so slightly different data type, but we just have to make sure that we are converting wherever we need to, doing what we need. Okay, build succeeded, so it seems to be working. And we'll let it load up here. Great, it's still working exactly as before with a different data type.